Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. It is January 4th, 2017, and this is the first edition of the MMA Ratings Podcast for the new year. I am Raphael Garcia, and alongside me is my partner in crime, Schwan Humes, who is back as always, and we are ready to talk about all the big news and the big action that's gone down from UFC 207 and some of the news that has broken over the last few days in mixed martial arts. But before we go there, I want to say hello to my co-host, Schwan. How are you doing there, sir?
Hey, I'm doing good as usual. Finally, actually made it to the beginning of a show instead of coming in 5 minutes late, so that's always good.
Hey, it's all good, man. It's all good. As long as you get here we get the business done. We got quite a bit to talk about, huh? Don't we?
Yeah, a lot of stuff's been going on recently. A lot of big stories and big events, which is the way we like it.
So before we jump into that, we're going to start first off with just saying you can always catch our work at MMAratings.net. You can catch us there. You can listen to past episodes of the show as well. You check us out on YouTube. You can find me at rgarcia_sports, and we'll go over all the new things that you can expect to see in MMA ratings up for this next week. But of course, we got to start at the top with today's news, I guess, or not really news, but we got to start at the top with the conversation about UFC 207. And of course, we got to look at what happened with Ronda Rousey and Amanda Nunes. For those of you who may not know, if you live under a rock, Amanda Nunes stopped Ronda Rousey in 48 seconds to defend her bantamweight title. And in doing so, she created quite the firestorm that everybody wants to see and ask questions about, because this is definitely the biggest win of her career, probably one of the most resounding wins that we've seen in a title fight in some time. And even the only one that could compare is Conor McGregor's win over Jose Aldo from last year. So we're just going to start there. Let's look at this victory, what it means for Nunes, what it means for Rousey, the women's division as a whole. So yeah, let's just start there, Shawan. I'm going to let you have the floor first. What did you think of last Saturday's win or last Friday's win?
Well, before I get into like any technical aspect of it, I wanted to address the fact that Rousey's way she cut off the media. That's pretty much the impetus for all the flack that Edmund's getting and the flack that Ronda's getting. She kind of usually when you have a big loss, but your changes you're making, you show them the changes you're making, the points of emphasis, the strategies. Ronda didn't do any of that. She stayed away from any questions that might have placed doubt on Edmund or on herself. So by cutting the media off and cutting everybody off, people have people jump to conclusions about how prepared she was, where she was focusing at, and what technique she was going to use to win the fight. Had she opened up a little bit more, she might have had some room to operate, and she wouldn't be getting as much heat. But she chose to go the opposite way and go radio silence and just hopes of focusing to win the fight. So when the fight goes badly and she looks unprepared, nobody has any information or no storyline that they can use to diffuse some of the pressure that's being applied to her now. In hindsight, after the loss.
So I'm just going to ask you a quick question. Can you turn off your camera because I can see your roof? Like, I guess you put your phone down flat, right? Because I can see your roof now. So I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out to you. But I definitely agree with what you said in reference to Rousey's response from a media angle. And we're going to talk about Edmund as well, because like that's a conversation topic that deserves its own moment. But it's an interesting parallel when you look at how Ronda Rousey handled her loss and compare it to how Dominic Cruz handled his. This is Dominic's first time losing in 10 years. It's funny because this is his first loss, and he's lost. This previous loss was before Ronda Rousey even began fighting professionally. So it's a pretty interesting parallel, because Cruz stood up in front of the media, answered questions very well. It didn't Of course, he's hurting. He just lost his title. He just lost his title to a fighter in Team Alpha Male. He got handled, but he handled it very eloquently. You often see people talk about how people athletes respond in the face of adversity. If you think back to the criticism that Cam Newton got after Super Bowl 50, where he didn't want to answer questions and walked out of the post game conference, that's very akin to what Ronda Rousey did in the lead up to this event and afterwards. So it's an interesting parallel between how she handled the media and how Dominic Cruz handled the media. Rousey has come out with Ramona Shelburne from ESPN, who's kind of like her personal reporter. She's one of the only individuals that has access to Rousey. She gave a official statement through her, but it was really pre-planned, and it wasn't anything that gave fans or media any insight to what's next for the former champion.
Well, the biggest thing is because right now, the, basically the fight I always say this to follow me on Twitter at hashtag lowercase MMA ratings. And I also always mention a following friend of the show, Andrew Pearson, because about 3 times in the past couple months, me and him have had it out on Twitter, basically going back and forth how the Rousey Nunes fight would go. His assumption, which ended up being correct, was Nunes was going to keep her range. She's going to come in, land shots, come out on an angle, and just punish Ronda and basically blow her out in the first round, which is exactly what happened. I used to always tell him that's most likely going to happen if Ronda doesn't make these minor changes. And they're minor changes that Edmund could actually implement if he had any sort of sense at all. And that's what Andrew would tell me. He'd say, Edmund's not a smart coach. The things you're telling me would work, but it only works if you have a coach smart enough to use them. And my approach was simply this. Instead of standing straight up, which Ronda does, straight up, tall in the pocket, come in at a slightly lowered stance, because you know Nunes isn't going to throw leg kicks or body kicks. Nunes isn't going to throw anything that's going to allow Ronda a chance to get her hands on her and put her on her back, because Nunes is awful off her back. Zingano beat her within an inch of her life, and a girl who could fight at strawweight in Valentina was slapping her around, and she was looking for ways out of that fight. She barely hung on against a girl she probably had 40 pounds on at fight night. She's not good from her back. Her guard work, her submission, none of it. It's just no good. So I said, what she needs to do is come in with a lowered stand, and when Nunes attacks, instead of trying to exchange with Nunes, especially exchanging to the head, when Nunes attacks, what you do is you counter to the body. You may not be able to hit somebody to the head. They can slip. They can kind of step out of range. But body shots are always there. Anytime you want to land a body shot, all you have to do is throw it. Watch enough MMA fights. This isn't boxing where guys know how to make you pay for it. I've seen fighters essentially turn whole fights around against longer, more athletic, and bigger opponents. I saw Conor McGregor do that against Nate Diaz. He started attacking the body, using feints, and working him to disrupt his rhythm and not let him get into a rhythm. All Ronda had to do was use feints, because that way you throw off Nunes' timing. She can't throw hard because she doesn't know if you're coming at her, you're really going to throw, or you're really going to go in for the clinch, or you're faking her. And when she throws, instead of going high, because Ronda likes to go high because she likes to punch her way into the clinch and go for that head arm throw, you go low, counter to the body hard, because Ronda can crack. Ronda can hit hard. She put McMahon down with one knee to the body. All she had to do is counter to the body. Now that you do that, Nunes can no longer get into that range she's comfortable with, because every time she's throwing it, you're ducking underneath, you're throwing to the body. Another side effect of that is when you throw to the body and you come in low under somebody's shots, you can come up and get the underhooks on them. When you get the underhooks, you can control them, push them to the fence. Once Ronda has underhooks and it has a clinch, she can beat Nunes up on the fence, and Nunes can't afford to counter and strike with Ronda on the fence in a clinch, because Ronda has the option of taking her down. So all Ronda has to do from that point is mix in strikes and takedown attempts, strikes and takedown attempts, strikes and takedown attempts. That's going to wear on Nunes' gas tank. That's going to keep her focus split, because she's going to be split between defending a takedown, defending a throw or a trip, and getting punched to the body or punched to the head. I'm not saying that would have necessarily, in my opinion, that's what it took to win the fight, but that would have made it a more competitive fight. You don't go out there head straight on to a person who's longer than you, has better footwork than you, and better offense than you, and better power than you. You bait them. You use feints, you use pressure to draw out an attack, and then you close the distance. You transition into that clinch range, and then you work her over. When we first announced the fight, I said Ronda can win because Nunes is going to throw that right hand. All she has to do is find a way to get past it to get into the clinch where she wants to. My suggestion, come in low, counter to the body. When you go to the body, come up. Nunes is going to defend the takedown because she's going to figure Ronda might be shooting on me. Once you get the underhooks, you put Nunes to the cage. How do I know that works? I saw Sarah McMahon do it to Nunes a couple years ago, and I know it was a couple years ago, but the thing about it is nobody would have expected that from Ronda. Ronda did exactly what she always did and got punished for it. When you're a fighter who's that predictable, any change you change one or two things, and instantly it throws your opponent off completely because they weren't expecting that from you. So Ronda gave her what she always does, and she got punished for it. And she didn't show any
What's
variation.
interesting about that is that I sent that to you. I sent that the audio clip that's making its rounds. Everybody's probably listened to it by now, of Edmund Tarvinian trying to talk Ronda through the fight as a fight is going on. And if you listen to what he's saying isn't necessarily wrong. He's telling her to use feints, telling her to use head movement. When things got dangerous and things got ugly, he told her to start trying to grab for a clinch when clearly that wasn't working. But my question then becomes, I know Edmund did a lot of hyping up of Ronda's striking early, especially early in her career, especially before the Sarah McMahon fight, when you heard him talking about her dropping women with body shots. You heard about her working with Triple G and how he was so impressed with her striking. So you have to wonder, did he do too much hyping up of her striking to make her think that she's going to step in there and fight the last two women who are known strikers? Did he do too much damage in hyping up the way and hyping her up in a way that made her think that she could go in there and strike with these women?
Well, he did. Partly the problem is this. A lot of people bash on Edmund. And as you know, I did two pieces, the good, the bad, and the ugly on Edmund. The first part was the good. A lot of people act as if Edmund has no sort of concept of striking and technique. He does. He just doesn't have a full understanding of how it works independently of MMA and within the context of MMA. What he used was Ronda's natural physical abilities and her skill sets from judo, and he came up with a basic platonic striking skill set that allowed her to take advantage of the holes in the games of the majority of women in the bantamweight division. A lot of them back up in straight lines. A lot of them can only throw a 1-2 or an overhand right. A lot of them aren't very good off the back foot when they back up, and nobody can pivot. So when you have those holes, someone exploding in straight at you, throwing a series of strikes, or somebody who's more durable enough to walk through your strikes to get to where she wants, is going to allow her to go to work. McMahon hit her with 1-2s, 1-2s, 1-2s. Ronda walked through them, got that clinch on her, put her up against the fence, and then started chopping away at her. When she fought Alexis Davis threw that shot. Ronda was coming in a straight line, countered it with a cross counter, got the knee, threw her, pounded her out. It was based on the limitations of the women she's facing. Edmund's not a terrible trainer. He just has limitations on his skill set and his ability to see things as a whole, and that's what's holding Ronda back. He needs help. He needs other people in there to help move her in another direction or refine the things he's taught her or build on them. He doesn't have the skill set to do that.
So before we move on with that conversation there, I think that this loss is going to truly damage Edmund. If everything leading up to, like, with the IRS and with what Rousey's mother had said about him, all of that stuff aside, like, if you look at the stats, like the stats breakdown, I'm not sure if you saw this picture that was being served around by Fightland, when it points out that, Ronda Rousey is the only fighter to have a winning record since training with him. Everyone else has gone 5-13, and 10 of those losses have been a finish. So his camp as a whole is truly struggling when it comes to their performances within the UFC. And I think that this situation, I think it's going to be interesting to see who sticks by him. I don't know. Like, is Rousey going to stick by him? I wouldn't be surprised if she left. And then if she does, where does she go? Because, does she go to a Jackson's where Holly Holm is training? Does she go to an Alliance where Kat Zingano is? Like, where can she really go at this point in time in her career? Or has she alienated everyone in such a way that she can't really go join one of these big power MMA teams?
It's not just about where she can go. As you know, somebody who's trained people, whether you're training as a hobbyist, you're training as an amateur, you're training as a pro, it's like getting a job or getting management or getting in a relationship. there's lots of good, like, let's put it in a relationship. There's lots of good men or women out there. That doesn't mean you're comfortable with all those men and women. It doesn't mean you'll reach your peak with all those men and women, because everybody has different emphasis, different temperaments. There's a lot of people who can't handle dealing with Rhonda. As many people bash Edmund and they criticize him for his relationship with Rhonda. Part of his relationship with Rhonda, as odd as it may seem, helped push her to the heights she got to. She bought into him. A lot of coaches can't get their fighters to buy in completely. I said this in my piece. How many times do you hear a coach, do this, why aren't you doing this, do that? Up until her losses, you never heard Edmund have to say that. Whatever he planned for Rhonda, Rhonda went out and executed. She bought in 110% to whatever. And whatever he told her, he helped her build her confidence. She was never that confident. Read her book about all her weight issues and her daddy issues and her losing issues. He believed in her 100%, and he gave her everything he had, and that helped push her forward. That made her feel bulletproof. And feeling bulletproof made her perform like she was bulletproof. We can't pretend like he didn't add things to her. And I heard an interview by Matt Serra. Matt Serra said, everybody's bashing him now, but nobody was bashing him when he was taking her from the bottom to the top. And I said this on Twitter. There's like me and like maybe 10 other people who were calling into question her technique or the things he was doing. Everybody else was saying she's great. Everybody else was saying she was amazing. She was improving. She was showing some skill. She was showing some awareness, but she was never amazing. It was the media, not just Edmund, because there's analysts out there who were saying how Rhonda's so great on the feet and she's amazing. Analysts on a bunch of networks. I can't even name the networks. I'm not even going to do that to them. But they kept saying that. And then watch after she lost at home. All of a sudden, all the analysts, well, Rhonda's footwork was really shoddy and her head didn't move. Where was that 2 months ago? I didn't see it, and I live and breathe MMA. You probably didn't see a lot of it either. Everybody didn't see how great she was.
Necessarily agree with that because there were individuals. So I'm not gonna say who outright questioned her from a striking standpoint, but nobody ever said she
I'll
was
hint at it.
a.
People know.
I'm sorry.
I said I can't. I won't say names, but if you go back to watch those UFCs where she's beating Misha and all those girls, everybody amazing, unstoppable. Look at the hands. Look at the development. Now she can strike too. I heard it all, dude.
Well, see, the thing is, I'm not going to wholeheartedly agree with that because I feel like the conversation is that her striking worked for what she's trying to do. Like she's never displayed striking on a level of a Holly Holm, Joanna Jacek. She's never shown striking at that level. The same way someone like Amanda Nunez, who's I believe she's a black belt in judo, she's never shown judo on Rousey's level. So I feel like the conversation was more around the idea of that Rousey's striking works for what she wants to do: close the distance, get in the clinch range, and then throw you on your head and finish the fight. The conversation was more that her striking was good for that. And I don't know. I always used to push the conversation. Someone even actually called me out on it because I asked about a fight against Holly Holm almost 2 years before the fight came, and I asked what happens when she gets in there with someone that she cannot take down and who has the footwork to strike and get out of range. And even with Amanda Nunez, I called this a year in advance. What happens when she runs in there against someone that hits ridiculously hard and makes her pause? Like if you look at that first jab that Amanda landed at UFC 207, you almost saw the soul go out of Rousey at that point. That from the very first jab, because it snapped her head back and she touches her forehead like, oh shit, I'm bleeding. It's happening again, and it goes straight downhill from there. So I feel like the conversation has been around that, but since she was winning so much, you didn't get the same level of criticism that you got after UFC 193.
But that's the point. That's where people are being lazy. I'm sure you've heard of Jordan Breen from Sherdog.
Yeah.
I used to call this show all the time. And one of the things we used to always talk about, he'd say, I appreciate when you call because you know how to analyze fights. You know how to break down fights. Everybody will say, well, this person won. And people focus on the results. They never focus on what happens in the fight. And that's why so many people get on the same narrative. I was saying that she was exposed against Misha Tate because she was showing limitations in how she reacted to getting hit, her counters, her ability to get past strikes effectively. That was obvious in her second fight with Tate. And everybody just kept saying, they kept seeing the result. They kept hanging on to the result. You can't hang on to the result. And the problem isn't that she all of a sudden can't strike or what she doesn't isn't effective. It's that she's doing the exact same thing. And that's no longer effective. If Edmund had a deeper understanding of boxing, where he could really develop her footwork. And I don't know that he can't. Maybe he can. I haven't seen it yet. Develop her footwork, develop her defensive awareness. There's ways around that. There's ways where she could have feinted her way into a clinch. Like I said, duck under the shot, work the body. When you get to the body, put 1-2 against the body. Then you right there to get the underhooks. That's two things right there. She didn't try either one of them. She could have tried parrying with her hands. She could have tried parries, taking angles, stepping back, using counters. I understand that Nunes is a better striker than her, but Nunes isn't some world-class striker. I saw Nunes get lit up by a woman who could fight at strawweight. Nunes isn't a world-class striker. She's a very good one, but she's not a world-class technical striker. Not in pure striking, she's not. So it's not impossible to get to her chin. It's not impossible to get to her body. Her footwork's good, but it's not just in and of itself so outstanding that she can't be touched. I've seen lesser fighters get her to the fence. I've seen lesser fighters get their hands on her. So I'm just saying there's ways around that. The only thing is Ronda did exactly what she always does, and that's what got her beat. Had she shown any variation, it would have taken Nunes time to adjust. But she came out there doing the same thing she's always done. And Nunes was ready for it 100%. She came out there running. She came in hot. Nunes hit her. Fight was essentially over from that point out. Why didn't she try to pressure slowly and get Nunes to come towards her? Why didn't she back off and make Nunes bait Nunes? Make Nunes throw that right hand. Load it up. I know Nunes is going to throw. She'll throw that. She throws that jab. I'm going to parry it. When she throws that right hand, I'm going right under it. The first time I go under it, I'm going to dig her to the body hard. Back her off. The second time I duck under, I'm going straight. I'm going to pretend like I'm going to shoot. She's going to try to get the underhooks on me, try to bring me up. Right there. I'm in the clinch. Push her to the fence. Go to work. That way, Nunes just brought you into the clinch. You faked the takedown that you had no intention of going after. She's got to get the underhooks to respect it because she knows her guard game is terrible from the bottom when she's on bottom. And now when she gets the underhooks and brings you up, now you're in the clinch. You're right where you want to be. You already got your hands on her. You're already body to body her. She didn't show any variation. I still believe Ronda could have been more competitive. I believe she could have won, but not doing the exact same thing the exact same way she's always done it.
What's interesting with that is, well, go ahead.
I said you take a year off, and I know if you take a year off, you should show some development. And my problem with Edmund and Ronda is Edmund took her very far. He did a lot of good things for her. Nobody's going to talk me off that point, but he has limitations. He knows he has limitations, and instead of bringing in help or working coming to things from a different angle, he did the same thing he always did with her. The advice he gave her wasn't bad, but the game plan he had from the get-go was not going to work. You can't just run in on somebody who has that kind of power. You feint your way in. You bait them. You make them give you what you want, and then you punish them.
And what's interesting is that, everyone always jokes about this quote, and they always joke about this idea, but there's always going to be that famous Mike Tyson quote that everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And I feel like this is one of those events where you really saw it happen to in plain sight, because there's no way on earth that Rousey and her team did not step into the cage on Friday with some type of plan in place. I guarantee you they had a plan in place to close the distance, get this fight to the ground where she's head and shoulders above everyone else in the field. But takes that first jab and you see her step back and she touches her head. Think about that. How often do you see a fighter check their head to see if they're bleeding like that in a fight, unless if it's bleeding and getting in their eyes and they can't see? How often do you see that?
Rarely.
And that right there tells me that, and I've always been saying that my biggest concern heading into this fight is where she is mentally. And I'm just saying that maybe that shot put her back in a place of panic, for lack of a better term, that we saw that is similar to what was going on towards the end of the fight at UFC 193.
No, I agree. I can see that. But my biggest concern is, and I understand maybe once she got touched, but I've seen boxers who've had that issue, and even they came out and were competitive early on. There's things he could have done and things she could have done to put that moment off a little bit. Look at other fights you've seen where people are really aggressive and then all of a sudden they back off and they make the other person come to them. There's variations of things she could have done that would have kept her from just getting rolled over right away. And maybe if you get past the first minute, or the shot that hit you is a glancing shot instead of a head-on clean one, maybe you get some confidence. Maybe you start rolling. You've seen it before with fighters. They just got knocked out, But they come out now. They're being a little safe. They're working the jab. They're working angles, and then they start building their confidence. So then when that shot hits them 3 minutes in instead of in the first 10 seconds, then they can respond differently. And as many people say, Ronda was many things. Ronda's not a coward, and Ronda's not soft. Ronda took a lot of those shots better than Misha Tate did. She took a lot of those shots better than most fighters did.
Hey, she never went down. She
Yeah,
never went down.
she was. They to me they didn't to me they didn't train her in a way that had her approach the problem correctly or react to the problem correctly, because physically she could take it. She took like 27 unanswered shots from the biggest hitter in the division, and she was still on her feet. I'm not saying she wasn't out, but she was still on her feet. She hit Misha Tate like twice, and Misha Tate was like, all right, I had enough.
I'm sure did. I
I'm
mean, her
just
nose,
making
like her nose was broke.
Yeah, Ronda had the physical durability to get through it, but you have to come up with a game plan that allows her to get some confidence. It's like you watch other sports, so you'll get this. If you have a wide receiver who's having a rough day, what do they say? They might have him run a sweep or end around, anything to get the ball in his hands, get some positive yards, and get his confidence. Your quarterback's throwing a bunch of bad shots, bad passes. You get him some easy passes to get his confidence going, to get him feeling good about himself. So then when he takes a hit 4 minutes into the quarter, he's all right because he's had some success. If she would have had any sort of success before, it would have made her feel a lot better, even when she took that shot. That's my perspective on it. I'm not saying it would have happened, but I've seen people get rocked and finished before and then come in the next fight. And then once you get in, you kind of get warm, you get your feet wet, you kind of get in that mindset. Once the fight's going, then you start coming on, even when you take big shots. But she took the first big shot like 5 seconds in. She didn't even have a chance to acclimate to the fact that she was in a fight.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was out of control. So, and we've spent almost the first half an hour talking about Rousey, but let's talk about the winner, man, because she's the one who has the most to gain from this win. We'll come back to Rousey at a later point in the show, but how big of a moment is this for Amanda Nunes? And me personally, I was kind of, I'm not gonna say the word offended, but I was, and not disgusted. I felt bad for the crowd when they started booing her after the fight was over, because here it is, this woman is, she's not as much of a pioneer as Rousey was, but again, she's the
She's not a
first
pioneer at
openly
all.
gay. Huh?
Oh, outside of the, you know what? You're right. Off the gay lesbian thing, she would be a pioneer in that. Well, she'd be the first champion, so she's a pioneer in that way. But she's not the
Yeah,
first
and
champion.
the thing is that the UFC truly dropped the ball in talking about her in that way. Like, I'm not saying that that's necessarily something that they should have sold and played up in a cheesy type of fashion, but Amanda Nunes should not have been booed in a sense, because she didn't deserve to be booed for defeating Ronda Rousey. Not in that way. I feel like she was cast as not giving her highlight before the event, cast her in a way that was unfortunate for people to be booing. It's kind of like when anytime there's an American fighter fighting against someone from another country and people start ignorantly chanting USA, USA, USA. It's like you don't necessarily like when people chant USA and Raphael Natal is fighting. He's from New York. And you're sitting here chanting USA, USA, USA against someone just based off of his name and his skin color. I feel like Nunes wasn't given that same type of respect that she should have earned because of the way the UFC presented her, and people were incorrectly booing her after the fight was over.
Well, that's a legit point, but I never hear anybody say the Brazilians are ignorant when they boo Americans, and I've seen them boo them. Nobody says ignorant; they say they're just supporting their countrymen. And I'm not saying it's right, but I've seen in Japan they don't do that. Japan they just sit quietly and admire the fights and the technique. But in other countries, they cheer their countrymen. I can't have a problem with that. As far as her getting booed, I don't blame that on the UFC. When Rashad Evans knocked out Chuck Liddell, I don't remember anybody cheering for him either. They have a fighter you're emotionally attached to and you're drawn to. You don't care who the better fighter is. You want your person to win. That's just the way it goes. And I'm not saying the UFC didn't drop the ball to an extent, because they could have pushed her. They could have promoted her. They could have put her out there more. I believe that 100%. But not every fighter is going to evoke emotion from somebody. You could be a better fighter and a better person, but can you evoke the same reaction that generate the same faith and confidence in people that this other person did? Ronda did that. I don't know. Maybe Nunes can As of yet, she hasn't. And Ronda did that. The UFC didn't build up Ronda. Ronda was already becoming a huge story before she got in the UFC. That's why the UFC jumped on her, because she was already bringing it. You might think, like, who was it? Who was Strikeforce? Scott Coker? Was Coker over Strikeforce? You might thank Scott Coker for building her up. The UFC kind of took advantage of the star that she already was and kept the ball rolling and pushed it to high, gave her a bigger platform to perform on. But they didn't make Ronda Rousey, just like they didn't make Conor McGregor. I think they should have pushed Amanda Nunes. But once again, I asked the question: what was Nunes doing in and of herself to get her message out there? Like, after the fight, I knew it was going to beat the shit out of Ronda. She started talking, showing her personality. Where the hell was that months before? Months before, where was that before she fought Misha? I don't remember her talking like that after she beat Misha. After she beat Misha, she was just like, "I won," blah blah blah.
Yeah,
Typical.
and I totally agree with you. I think that the lack of respect she was getting, or the lack of promotion she was getting before this event, pissed her off, and I think we are seeing that now, especially if right after the fight, when Joe Rogan was talking to her and she's yelling out, "Forget about Ronda Rousey."
So
This is
what you're
from my
saying is,
observation.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
My observation is that she was so pissed at it being 99% Rousey and 1% Nunez, that when she got her out of there, that was her demanding for her respect. And was it too late? I don't know. Are we going to see? I don't think that we're going to see those Rousey fans translate to, like, that's even the conversation I've had with some people who are diehard Rousey fans. I don't see that happening. But
So what you're saying is she should thank the UFC, because by angering her, we got to see her personality and see some of what makes her who she is. Because
yeah,
before that, she didn't give us nothing. She gave us less than nothing. Part of being a fighter, you want, like, it's like you want people to relate to you. You want people to believe in you. It's never been enough to just do your job. I mean, if you're the best company, you have the best product, you make the best product. We all know you make it. Nobody knows until you advertise it. Even if your competitors know, if you're not advertising it, nobody knows that you have the best product. She didn't do anything to build her own star. Conor McGregor didn't come in here with a bunch of fanfare. He had his own fan base. UFC didn't make him. He got a platform. He took it over. Amanda Nunes has been fighting for years. At no point has she drawn anybody's interest past a technical fighting level, because she has said or done nothing of a personal level to gain people's interest. She just wants to fight. She wants to be a fighter, and she wants to get paid for being a fighter. But if you're a fighter who fights really well and you're an entertainer, that's where the real money comes from. You know, Cody Garbrandt isn't thought of as a star now just because he's a good fighter. Dominic Cruz isn't more of a star now just because he's a good fighter. It's because he had opportunities to speak and he jumped all over them. Amanda Nunes was the bantamweight champion of the world, and she was getting ready to fight Ronda Rousey. Instead of waiting for people to give you interviews, why aren't you setting up your own interviews? Where's your management team? Even Eddie Alvarez was doing a bunch of talking before he fought Conor. Now, he got smoked, but he got his name out there. He got stories written about him, all pushing it. His management, him, are pushing it, trying to get his name out there as much as possible, trying to improve his brand. She did, and I don't know that she didn't do it, but I didn't see her do it. I didn't hear anything about it. And if she's telling me the UFC hasn't set everything up, you're the bantamweight champion of the world. You're telling me somebody wouldn't listen to you if you wanted to talk? Are you telling me you couldn't get an interview with a major gay and lesbian magazine or blog or TV show or whatever? You're telling me the bantam first major women's champion who's gay or lesbian couldn't get an interview? I don't know if I believe that. And I don't believe the UFC
yeah.
would have held her out of it either. So I don't think she did enough. Ronda did a lot of her own work. Misha Tate did a lot of her own work. Holly Holm, in comparison, did not. And even after beating Ronda, her star did not skyrocket. I don't know that Nunes is skyrockets either, because I don't know that she wants to do the other part of it, which is the really hard part. The fighting part is difficult in one instance. The other part is the real hard part, because it's the stuff she doesn't really care about. She cares about a paycheck. Fight, you'll get your paycheck. But if you want the other stuff, then you got to work and interview and tour and do all the book signings and all that other stuff. I don't know that she wants to do it. Ronda embraced it. Misha Tate embraced it. Conor McGregor embraces it.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you there at all. Like, that is definitely some very good insight on what has kind of limited Nunez to becoming, and I'm not going to say to becoming a big star, but up to this point, now everyone's really talking about her. And what's interesting is you still don't hear, like, like was ESPN talking about her at all? They were talking about Rousey after the fight was over. Like the MMA media media outlets were talking about a Nunez post event, but I can't think of any mainstream outlets. I think of maybe one that looked at her relationship with Nina, and looked at it from that angle. But other than that, I can't think of any real outlets that have taken a interest in Nunez since this win.
I wanted to make one more point. That's very valid. That I wanted to make. If Ronda would have put up a better fight and it would have been more give and take, the story wouldn't have been Ronda. Ronda looking almost the exact same way she looked versus Holm takes away from Nunes' win because it looks like Nunes is just finishing off Holmes. She's doing Holmes' light work. Like Holm did the heavy lifting. Holm exposed her. All you did was jump on a broken and fractured girl again. Now, if Ronda would have taken a couple shots and gone a couple rounds and maybe got a quick takedown or put some leather on her and it would have been kind of competitive or Ronda would have looked a little better, people would have talked about Nunes because they would have said Ronda, because before when people were looking at Ronda, how good a shape she was in, they would have been like, Ronda came out, she was hungry, she got the takedown, blah, 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 blah. Nunes fought through it and then Nunes got the win. So we saw an improved Ronda, still wasn't good enough for Nunes. But the old Ronda, we saw wasn't good enough to beat Holm, who's on a 2-fight losing streak, to girls that Nunes beat. So so people aren't impressed by that. Had Ronda shown some improvements and shown some depth, the talk would have been how Nunes beat a reinvigorated Ronda Rousey. But when Ronda's basically looking like she's lost out there, of course the focus is going to be on her because she was the baddest woman on the face of the planet, and now she looks like a girl who'd never been in a fight before, like a girl who cut through everybody.
That's exactly what it looked like.
So if the fight would have been
That's
competitive,
exactly
I
what it looked like.
guarantee you Nunes would have got more focus. But when you steamroll somebody who we just saw get steamrolled last time she was in a cage, it's not as impressive. In fact, Holly Holm gets more credit because Holm took a big left hand and hung on long enough to fight, and Holm got taken down. It was in position to be finished, and she escaped. That's why Holm got so much credit because she got put in moments of adversity and she fought through. It just looked like Nunes was beating up on a girl who just got knocked out the week before. Like everybody beats this girl up, and now you beat her up too. Congratulations. It wasn't competitive. It was like the cyborg effect. You don't give the girl any credit because it was such a one-sided beating. Now, if it's competitive, you're like, wow, Nunes really has something. But when she's just beating up on something like that, it just makes people just feel sorry for Ronda. They don't think about the other person because it was so one-sided.
Yeah, like it was a very clear one sided win, and I think that that's kind of what is not I'm gonna say damaging, but is causing her uptick to be rather slow. Um, what uh, what do you think is next for Nunez? Are we going to pencil in the winner of Juliana Pena versus Valentina Shevchenko?
I mean, the sad thing for Nunes, well, Nunes should be happy because she got the two biggest names in her division, so she should have gotten paid pretty decently. Tate and then Rousey, two biggest names back to back, so she should be good on the money part. But because essentially, there's no other money fights in division anymore. Yeah, she'd have to fight Cyborg, who's suspended. I guess she could move up and fight Holm, but Holm's not a big name. Holm doesn't make any money. So I assume Juliana Pena is the biggest star in division now. I mean, as far as somebody on a winning streak who fans are somewhat familiar with, Pena is probably the best option she has as far as making money and getting some kind of crossover attention. I think she's going to end up having to fight Valentina, and I think Valentina is going to like kind of beat the brakes off her. But that's the only option she has. Nobody else has any attention, any cachet, and nobody else has that argument except for Pena and Valentina.
Yeah, I think it'll be Pena, especially if she gets by Shevchenko. Well, I think either or whoever wins that fight will be next for Nunez. But you're right; they're going to have to book it on a show where she's the co-main event and another champion is at the top of the docket. And since we're talking about
Oh, one second. I just want to make sure. I just want to ask you this. Um, I have something called the Mayweather effect or the Oscar De La Hoya effect. People would fight one of those guys and get a big payday and be on a main spot, main event. And then if they beat them, they would start thinking that they were a comparable star to them. When in actuality, they kind of rode the A-side star to big paydays in crossover media. Do you think that Nunes is going to start feeling that way? Like she's going to feel like I beat her, so now I need to be treated like Rousey because she is not yet proven to be the star that Rousey is. But she might start thinking
Mm-hmm.
that she feels like I should get paid like her, I should get the media attention like her, and she beat her, but she's not her. And that's that if she feels that she is, that could cause problems with her and the ownership. Because Dana White's not going to pay her like Ronda because he
Nah.
knows she didn't bring in all those fans. Ronda brought him in. When she fought Misha, Misha brought him in. She rode on. I don't want. She didn't rode their coattails as far as fighting skill, but she rode their coattails as far as main eventing. If it would have been anybody else, she wouldn't main event. So now she might think that she's a star that she's not right now.
Yeah, like nah, like that's I don't think that well, I don't think that's not going to happen. And I think that I'm not going to use the word smart enough, but I think that people understand that they're not going to get that same type of rub. They're not going to get that same type of response. I think we see that. Conor McGregor, or excuse me, when Nate Diaz beat Conor McGregor, he didn't get that type of response. Yes, he got a bigger payday that next time out, but now he's talking about he's not going to answer a phone call for anything less than $20 million. Well, we all know that's not going to happen. So I don't think Nunez is going to act in that type of way, but it'll be interesting to see because she only got $200,000 for his win.
Yeah, I'm
So
just
it,
saying
it
she hasn't had to carry the sport or the division on her back. Misha and Ronda did all that for her. She just got she got to ride along with that and take advantage of it when she was ready. Now it's on her. So if she's not getting paydays, that's on her. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're not getting paydays or you're not getting opportunities and the UFC is promoting you, then the problem becomes you. It's no longer anybody else. If you get where I'm coming from.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I do want to transition from here and talk about the other title fight that went on at UFC 207, where Cody Garbrandt ended Cruz's 10-year winning streak. Granted, we got to look at some of those years he was out, so it was more about 7. But he definitely, I don't want to say he beat the Dominator at his own game, but he beat the Dominator's game. He, instead of chasing after him, trying to match his movement and trying to one shot him, he forced Cruz to be first, and he was excellent at counter striking. His defensive wrestling was key in this fight. And he had some takedowns of his own as well too. And as the fight wore on, you definitely saw him getting the better of Dominic Cruz in a way that we haven't seen ever. So the question now becomes, well, of course you're going to tell me what you thought of this fight and break that down, but how impressive was Cody's performance overall? Like, what did you see that kind of blew you away from how he took the men's bantamweight title away from Dominic Cruz?
I was on Twitter all night as usual when these events go on, and you can talk to Michael. Michael will tell you he will confirm this. I wasn't impressed at all because I predicted it was happening. People ask me, fights coming up. What's your prediction, Schwan? I said it's going to be Garbrandt. I'm sorry, it's the way I'm seeing it, and I can't take full credit for it myself. Early in his run, there's a trainer who works up at Stipe's camp, works with him sometimes. Stipe, Jessica I, some others. He's a boxing trainer called Joe Del Good. I can't know if I say his name right. He's one of the guys I follow. He follows me, and before Cody fought, I said I like Cody's speed, I like his power, I like his offensive skills, but if he can't establish a jab, use footwork, fight off his back foot, and counter, there's no way he's gonna get any further. He's too predictable. And Joe told me, he said he can do everything. I've seen him box. I've worked with him personally. I've seen him fight. I know people in his family. He can do whatever you need him to do when it comes to the aspect of boxing and applying it to MMA. And once he told me that, because I trust this guy, because I had many conversations about boxing and other MMA fighters. I've talked about his fighters himself with him. Many hours we spent going back and forth, writing each other, emailing, discussing these things. So I trusted his opinion. Once he told me that, I was totally signed on for Garbrandt. The thing about it that shocked me is that nobody else seemed to ever try this plan with Cruz. And I've said this before, when Cruz was fighting Raya for the last time, I said Faber needs to counter him, especially to the body. Stop leading, because when you lead, you give him all the chances for him to counter. You give up all those takedowns because you're opening up your hips to land those shots. You're overextending. He's taking you down, creating these scrambles and catching you when you get up with strikes. You need to sit back and counter him. And Faber tried to do that, but The thing that Faber didn't have that Garbrandt does have is boxing. Faber can't box. TJ Dillashaw, for as good a striker as he can punch. He can't box. And Cody's boxing ability is what won him this fight. He knew how to measure distance. He knew how to reassess distance. He knew how to readjust distance. And not just do that, but do it and make people counter at the same time. Lots of guys can move out of the way and some guys can sidestep, but they can't do it while working an effective and consistent counter striking game. And that's what he did. He just made Dominic lead. Dominic isn't a terrible lead fighter, but if you watch enough of his fights, you see every time it gets counter big is when he's trying to lead. He's gotten countered before. He got countered by Dillashaw. He's been countered by Faber. He got countered by Joseph Benavidez. But once they landed big, those guys started chasing him because, oh, I landed the big shot. Now I'm going to put another one on him and put him away. Garbrandt maintained his discipline and forced Cruz to pursue him all fight long and just picked him off. Because it's one thing when a guy's chasing you and you're using feints and pivots and little fakes and all this stuff. That works because he's coming to you. He's cutting the distance off and he's reacting to what you're doing while he's trying to get in range with you. When that guy who usually uses all those tricks is coming forward, it doesn't matter how defensively sound you are. When you're coming forward, you are easier to hit. That's just common sense. So once Cruz was unable to bait him and he started coming forward throwing strikes, you started noticing how his strikes are a little wide. You started noticing his inaccuracy. Cruz has never been an accurate striker, but coming forward makes him even less so. So it's like, for one,
Mm-hmm.
somebody saw what he did and they actually forced him into the areas he's weak in. That was my only concern with the coaching in Alpha Male attacking in the way that it needed to be attacked to expose the holes he has in his game. And I guess they put it together. I thought Garbrandt was totally capable of doing it. That based on what I know by guys who had worked with him and trained with him.
Yeah, it was a hell of a win. And I thought that it was impressive to watch from start to finish. I was excited watching. I was excited watching what was happening here because it makes, I don't say it makes that weight class interesting again, but that it was an exciting affair to watch from start to finish. And I can agree with you in your breakdowns there that he took advantage of the fact that Cruz isn't accurate, especially not coming forward, and that he was going to the body, he was mixing up his shots very well. And I really appreciated the fact that he was so patient in every exchange. He was pulling the fight back to the center of the cage every time that it started getting on the outside instead of sticking out there and finding himself in a position where he could maybe get pushed up against the cage and taken down. He would circle out, step back in the middle of the cage, and literally it got to a point where he started pointing at the center of the cage, telling Dominic to fight me here. And I think that that's what was so impressive and just so enjoyable for me as a fight fan to watch from start to finish.
It was nice. It was nice seeing boxing. Everybody keeps on clowning on boxing and saying how easy it is to do. But when you see somebody, Conor McGregor, Cody Garbrandt, when you see somebody showing the various aspects, the different layers of boxing, you appreciate how difficult a skill it is to have. Because lots of guys have had the right idea with Cruz, but they could never maintain it because they didn't have the poise and they didn't have the skills. They would back up and try counter, but then they would get stuck on the fence. And then when he would rush them, they didn't know how to pivot. They couldn't pivot, and they couldn't pivot, make him miss, and then make him pay. It's little aspects like that every martial art has, but boxing, due to the nature of it, and how many people compete and how popular it is and how much money is in it, you won't see that level of execution in 90% of other combat sports. So, I mean, he essentially just fought a smart fight, but he had the boxing background and the fundamentals to be defensively responsible and to be effective on the counter, and that's what turned the fight. And one thing I was amazed at, and I was so happy to see, was somebody countering to the body. All that dipping and slipping Cruz does, it works when you're loading up for power shots or you're trying to put combinations at his head. But every time he dips, the body's still there. He could dip to the left. You throw the right hook to the body, it's still gonna land, no matter which way he dips or he pulls his head back. Sometimes you throw a straight right to the body, he's off balance. His head is back. His chest and his stomach are right there for you to attack. I don't understand why nobody has consistently attacked his body for the length of his career. It confounds me on every level every time I see him fight. And it was just nice to see someone actually attack those holes. As good as he is and as smart as he is, every fighter has holes. But for some reason, people get it in their mind that they have to win a fight a certain way. And it was nice to see somebody, especially a young guy who didn't have a lot of world class experience, showing that sort of thoughtfulness and that kind of poise. That was what it was impressive. You figured once he dropped him, he would get over anxious and get finished. Nope, back to work. I'm sticking to the game plan. No matter what happens, what I'm doing is working, and I'm going to keep doing it until he finds a way to stop it. And Cruz never had an answer. It's a big win for Team Alpha Male, though. They had been known as a team that can't keep a champion or can't get a champion. They had Dillashaw when he got the belt. They have Garbrandt when he got the belt. And for Faber, this has got to be amazing because he just retired, lost his last title fight, and his guy he brought in, he got into the UFC, won the title from his arch nemesis. So it's got to be a great day for him.
Yeah, it definitely was. And it was huge. So with that in mind, what do you is it automatic, for lack of a better term, to think that Dillashaw is next for Garbrandt, especially after that performance he put on against John Lineker? I mean, excuse me, but he basically owned John Lineker from start to finish. And that fight, man, that fight was impressive to me. I enjoyed every bit of it because I loved how he was mixing up his striking and his wrestling. If you I'm not sure if you saw Luke Thomas's breakdown, but the way he was hitting that out of the penetration step to the outside trip was amazing, and it's definitely something that I appreciated being someone who teaches wrestling. But with Dillashaw's win at UFC 207, is he the next guy up for Cody Garbrandt?
I have a love-hate relationship with TJ. I think he seems like a good guy. Seems like a good offensive fighter. I can't stand his defense. I just think it's awful. I think he's a little bit overrated as a striker, in my opinion. I'm sorry. Just how I feel. But I don't know that he gets that fight. I mean, the UFC can force it, but Garbrandt, he asked for Cruz for a rematch. He's already calling out Jose Aldo. He's saying he'll move up and fight other people. I mean, you're starting to hear this trend again. And they talked to his coach recently. His coach said the same thing. Cody wants a money fight. You're gonna start hearing that all the time. He doesn't want to just beat up on guys and knock out guys for low pay wages and benefits. He wants fights that are gonna line his pocketbooks. He wants fights that are gonna get him to the next level. I don't know that Dillashaw, I don't know that Dillashaw can bring for the hardcores. Him beating Dillashaw might bring him to another level. I personally always thought he could beat Dillashaw, so him beating Dillashaw will prove nothing to me. But as far as an attractive, sexy fight you can sell for big ratings or big pay-per-view, Dillashaw is not that guy. A rematch with Cruz might sell because you still have the alpha male beef, and it's the first time Cruz lost, and seeing Cruz handle the way he did, people might pay for that. But Dillashaw fight, that's not a big seller. That's not even real. I mean, technically it's interesting. It's incredibly interesting, many layers. But as far as selling a fight, I don't know. I don't know, man. That fight does not scream. That fight does not scream big seller to me. And as good as Dillashaw looked against Lineker, that just makes me question all the guys who lost to Lineker because Lineker is probably one of the worst technical fighters in division. And
Yes.
and Dillashaw outclassed him, but Dillashaw should outclass him. He's a better technical striker, and he's a better grappler, and he's a better wrestler. Like that's how you're supposed to fight Lineker. For some reason, everybody who fights him gets dragged into these ridiculous brawls that are exciting and great for you and me, but bad for these guys' careers and bad for the win-loss columns. Dillashaw showed poise and he showed all the skills in beating him, but he beat a guy who can't wrestle defensively, and he beat a guy who's terrible on the ground. So him dominating him on the ground, I mean, it's great to see. I'm glad he fought smart, but I mean, it didn't really impress me all that much. It was a great win. It was excellent, flawless victory. But I mean, it was a flawless victory against a very flawed fighter. So I wasn't as high on that win as other people were. I mean, it's still a win, but I just wasn't as high on it.
I can understand your
I know I'm hating. I'm sorry. I know.
Hey
I'm
man,
hating.
everyone's entitled to an opinion, dude. Here, there's no such thing as hating. It's all about what you want to do, man. So I don't have any problems with you being opposed to your views being different on that fight. I mean, I don't have any issues with that. You're not hating in my book, but I still think it was. I enjoyed watching that fight again, as I mentioned, for my interest of it being a striking and wrestling fight. I think it was. I enjoyed watching that fight again, as I mentioned, for my interest of it being a striking and wrestling fight. I think it was. I enjoyed watching that fight again, as I mentioned, for my interest of it being a striking and wrestling fight. I think it was. I enjoyed watching that fight again, as I mentioned, for my interest of it being a striking showcase. Yeah, I've always had questions about Lineker as well because I always thought that he's someone that if he can't put you out, that you can go in there and you can have your way with a lot of the same way um, Ali Bagotinov gets dealt with, or the way he dealt with John Lineker, excuse me. But yeah, it wasn't. It was a big win to me. I think Dillashaw is next in line for Garbrandt. And I think that when paired, that could be a fight that they could put on a Fox platform and grow from there.
I actually want to ask you a technical question because since you kind of have a lot more depth of experience in the wrestling grappling aspect, I noticed because it's kind of a transition when Cody was probably the most athletically gifted fighter, in his prime that Cruz had faced, and the only other time he faced a guy like that would have been like Demetrius Johnson. Faber was getting a little bit past it when they fought the second time and the third time. But what do you make of like how important Cruz's ability to take someone down is in relation to his entire MMA game? Like his striking has always been good, and we focus on that so much, but it got really highlighted in this fight with Cody that if he can't take you down and get those clean takedowns and control you or dictate scrambles, that striking isn't nearly as effective as well. Like a lot of his success is based on him being able to draw you in and get that takedown and control you and kind of out wrestle you.
Yeah, like his wrestling was you. It wasn't. How can I put it? It wasn't. He wasn't going in there thinking he was a world class boxer and he's going to knock you out. His striking was meant to open you up and get you in bad positions where his takedowns can then come into play. And he was unable to do that in this fight. Period. Um, that is what the issue was. And oftentimes, like he's kind, it's more or less that he's flashing punches rather than looking to land strikes to get you out of there. Like, when's the last time he's knocked someone out? Takei Mizugaki.
That was on the ground.
He,
That was on the ground.
yeah, and that was on the ground. Like, has he ever knocked anyone out, finished anyone from strikes? Let me look. I think the answer to that is no, but I mean, Takea, he finished on the ground. Brian Bowles was a doctor stoppage. I don't know about this fight back in 2008 that he finished via KO. I'm not sure about that. And he had one other KO back in 2006. Excuse me, he had one in 2006 and one, two, three early in his career. But I can't think of him ever like one punching someone.
Yeah, like world class opposition. I've never seen it.
Yeah, I can't think of him ever one punching someone and getting them out of there.
Isn't it kind of weird how it kind of mirrors the Ronda Rousey thing in sense like you were saying Ronda's her striking was a great tool to create, as we've all you and me agreed, her ability, her striking was effective as a transitional tool to which she could get a clinch, where she was much more effective striker in the clinch and could get those takedowns. And it's funny how as much as Cruz is known for being a good striker and awkward and unorthodox, without the takedown threat, a lot of his striking effectiveness didn't seem to be there, not defensively or offensively.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that.
Just weird. Just weird how quickly that, once you took that away, it's like, well, he's still difficult on the feet, but he's not a mystery. He's not an unsolvable riddle now. He's just a difficult question, one that can be answered with enough preparation and study, but he's no longer unanswerable. Before he's unanswerable, but this time I don't want to say he was exposed, but it's hard not to think that to a certain degree.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that, and it creates an interesting conversation there. Um, yeah, that's a very very key point there. I forgot what my next question was going to be, my friend. So we actually already talked about what Dillashaw and Garbrandt will look like. So let's talk about the rest of UFC 207. What else impressed you from that event, if anything else did?
Yeah, I'm trying to really think. I'm really trying to think. The prelims didn't really do much for me.
Nothing really stood out except for Alex Garcia absolutely exploding Mike Pyle's head. Um,
Yeah, that was sad to watch.
yeah, I mean, at 41 years old, and I kind of hope that he is done. I mean, we don't never. Everyone always says you never want to tell somebody when to retire, but when you see a 41-year-old man getting knocked out like that, you gotta start asking questions.
Well,
I
I have another spin on that. Nobody wants to be told when to retire, but I don't. And mind you, I know fighters. I'm a fan of fighters, but I don't want to be told about how many problems you're having when you're getting knocked out like that, and you continue to press forward. That might be the last one you can recover from and maintain your quality of life. So if you continue to go forward and your quality of life suffers, don't tell me how the UFC didn't take care of you and the fans didn't care until you stopped and once the lights went out, because they're fans saying you need to retire and protect yourself and look out for your family. You don't want to listen to us. So don't act like we don't exist when things start going bad and be like, well, the fans don't care. We cared. You told us to mind our own business because you're a grown man and you can do what you want. So
Yeah.
now you have to deal with that. And side note, Alex Garcia needs to fight like that all the time. He basically did the poor man's version of Tyrone Woodley. Stop exploding on guys right away. What you do is you bait them in, they give you something, you're so dynamic, explosive, and fast, you're going to be able to counter almost 90% of what guys throw at you because you're such a better athlete. That way you don't waste your energy chasing takedowns or chasing strikes or expose your defense by running into big shots. Back up, create some distance, bait him in, make him pay. That way he fought that fight was an improvement over what he's shown in other other events he's performed in. And I hope he builds on what he did in that fight. Pyle is older and he's not as physically sharp as he used to be, but he's still a very seasoned and skilled veteran. So that's still a legit win in my book. Just because he should retire off it doesn't mean it wasn't a legit win. It showed something.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that. Like, just because it was a bad win for him, that doesn't necessarily mean that he should be done. Let's see what else happened this past weekend. We also had World Series of Fighting, and they had an event on Saturday. And it was more par for the course. Probably the biggest news, I guess, out of that was that John Fitch defeated Jake Shields to become the World Series of Fighting welterweight title, or welterweight champion. But he mentioned that this may be his last fight because of a knee injury. Did you see any of those fights on Saturday?
I watched some of them. I watched the Gaethje fight, and I watched Moraes fight. I don't know if that's saying his name right. Sergio. I saw him fight, and I saw the Shields Fitch fight. It was actually good. I mean, if you knew what to expect and you're a fan of wrestling and grappling, then you were like, it was like a poor version of the Shields versus Maya. It wasn't nearly as technical, but it was basically a lesser version of that. And if you like grappling a lot and can appreciate that, then it was fine. If you were like looking for, just bleed and knock him out, then you were going to be sorely disappointed.
Yeah, it was basically it was what I expected it to be, and I enjoyed it myself.
It was two skilled guys who knew what to do on the ground. It wasn't one guy laying and praying. It was just
Yeah,
with very deliberate, intelligent, defensively responsible games fighting, and it was. I found it to be very enthralling. I was very impressed. I thought Fitch put on a good performance. I thought Shields represented himself very well. But I mean, if you're just looking for him to slug it out, then it was gonna be the worst thing ever to you. But I enjoyed it personally.
yeah, I definitely enjoyed what I saw as well too. Wasn't surprising in the outcome, but it was definitely what I expected to see. And then what do you It's funny, man, because thinking of the way, like, and that just made me think of the Jake Shields Damian Maya fight. Thinking of the way Maya is kind of embarrassing everybody right now, and we look back to what Jake Shields was able to do to him. It reminds you how great these guys really were, excuse me, even though they were cut from the UFC for whatever reasons may be.
Jake Shields might be a possible Hall of Famer, first ballot. When you look at the list of names he's beaten, it's going to be hard to keep him out of any real MMA Hall of Fame because
Oh, easy, easy, easy. It's hard to keep him out of it anywhere. And if anyone tried to make the argument to do so, like, they need to get kicked in the face. Like, there's no reason why that should even be in the conversation. Like, this is the guy he beat Dong Young Kim, Carlos Condit, and Martin Kampman in the same night. Beats Dan Henderson. Who else has he beaten? He got a shot at. He beat Damian Maya. He gave GSP a hell of a competitive fight.
He beat was it? He beat Tyrone Woodley too.
Did he? He
Yep.
did. I forgot all about that fight. He beat Tyron Woodley too. Like this guy is beating a
on the
huge.
feet. Not he didn't even grapple. He essentially beat him on the feet of all things.
I remember that. Let me like now I want to see for my own self who is he beating. Okay, so he's beating Damian Maya, Tyron Woodley,
And a UFC.
Martin Kampman. He beat Robbie Lawler too. I forgot about that. Um,
Do you understand what you're just saying? He beat a UFC interim champ, a former UFC champ, and the current welterweight champ. One guy beat all three of them.
all three of them.
He beat
Ridiculous.
Dan Henderson for the Strikeforce title. One of the greatest middleweights of all time. He beat him too.
He's like I said, he beat Carlet Okami. He beat man, I'm still scrolling down. He's beaten so many guys on like over, and he's been man, yeah. There's no way you can say that this guy's not a first ballot
Three
Hall of Famer.
UFC welterweight champions are on his resume. That pretty much says all you need to say about him. That's all you need to say right there.
So, what did you think of Marlon Morales and Justin Gaethje? They have some very strong performances. You know, they're two guys who World Series of Fighting is kind of are hitching their wagon to. They've both signed long-term deals with the promotion, but the question is going to continue ranging as they are beating guys who may not necessarily be big names. Aren't they definitely aren't big names in the sport? What do you think both of these men would be able to do if they made the leap over to the UFC? They're both relatively still young. I don't think either one of them is over 30. Let me check real quick. I don't think either one of these guys is over 30. What do you think these guys would be able to do if they moved over to the UFC?
Well, the first thing they're gonna do is take pay cuts. That's first thing. But if you're talking about the actual fight, I think my concern with Gaethje is I'm a big fan of his. I'm a fan of his coach Trevor Whitman, and he's improved defensively. But that dude gets hit, and he gets hit a lot. Even against these guys who would be considered like second, high third tier, mid second tier in the UFC. These guys he's been beating, these guys have hit him a lot. I mean, he gets hit even in this one fight. He that first round was real competitive. He was catching a lot of heat in that fight. And then he started coming on later and they called the fight when the guy get injured. But my whole thing with him is how long is his chin and his ability to recover gonna last? Is it gonna be one of those situations like with Nam Fan where Nam Fan's best years were outside of the UFC, and by the time he got to the UFC, he didn't have anything left, and then people were left seeing like, oh, this is the guy who was supposed to be UFC caliber. Like Gaethje's been every fight he's in is a war, and I don't know how long, I don't know when the time's gonna come where he catches that shot and that's it for him. He's face first down and his chin is gone forever because his whole style is based on him outworking you, being more physical, to take your shots, and then when you hurt him, to recover from your shots. And when every fight you're in is a war, that just counts that ticker down a little bit faster. And in the
Mm-hmm.
UFC, they have so much depth in that division. Almost anybody from 25 to number one, like that's one division where the number 15 guy could beat the number one guy. There's guys who aren't
Mm-hmm.
in the top 10 who may be able to beat Conor McGregor right now.
Lando
You
Venata,
know,
that's my boy.
and so he's going in with those kind of guys. I mean, I think he can win. I think he could probably get top 10, maybe even top 5. I mean, I could see him if his chin holds up. I could see him even maybe getting to the point where he can compete for a UFC title. But I just got so many questions about his defense and the fact that he hasn't been in with guys who are his athletic superior or his physical superior. That's a big cushion to have, knowing that you're physically stronger, harder hitting, and tougher than everybody you face. That's a big ace in your hole to have. What happens when he faces somebody and that ace in the hole doesn't exist anymore? Like, what happens then? What
It's
happens
funny that you brought that up because he did have a when you say he's facing what would happen if he faced guys in the UFC rankings like in that ladder. When he fought Melvin Gillard, that was a split decision win. He almost lost that one, and we know Gillard's track record when it comes to facing what his value was at that point. This is
yeah,
2014. When he was on the downward slope.
yeah, Gillard in spots and his pressure and his volume broke Gillard down, but in spots, Gillard was outboxing him. Gillard was sticking him, countering him to the body, picking him off, pivoting out, controlling the distance and the range. Like, I mean, it was an exciting, thrilling back and forth fight, but that was a fight that didn't really do a whole lot to raise Gaethje's stock because he looked very human against a guy who wasn't in a physical prime, who hadn't really been dedicated to the sport in years. and had just gotten cut by the UFC. I mean, Gallar was putting in some serious work and exposed some some holes in my opinion. And I'm not saying that Gaethje can't address them or won't address them, but at that point, Gallar shouldn't have been outboxing anybody. And in many spots in that fight, he was clearly outboxing Gaethje and outpointing him.
And what about Marlon? Like, where would you put him if he joined the UFC bantamweight division?
Well, the division's still thin enough where I think he could probably be in the top 5, top 10, and he's a very dynamic guy. I mean, offensively, he's amazing to watch his setups, his entries, his counters. But once again, I have the same issue with him that I have with Gaethje. He hasn't faced a guy who, when he hits him with his best shot, can take it. He hasn't faced a guy who he can't slow down or back off with his power. Like he hits these guys start not coming after him as hard. If he hits John Lineker with that shot, Lineker's not going to back off. Lineker's not going to get scared. Lineker's going to swing extra hard. He fights John Dodson. John Dodson was fast at it's what is it, strawweight, flyweight. Dodson was fast at flyweight. There were flyweights who can keep up with him.
Mm-hmm.
Is Marlon is he faster than Dodson? Because Dodson was fast. Like I said, he was faster than Demetrius Johnson, who's faster than Marlon, which means Marlon be facing for the first time in years to be facing a guy with better athleticism, with better hand speed and more explosive. Now, not better cardio, or then again, we don't know how his cardio holds up because all the fights he's been in have been fairly competitive, one-sided beatings. The guy's had some moments, they've gotten a little bit of work done, but they haven't really pushed him. We don't know what he's like when he's pushed. We don't know what it's like when he's in a bad situation. We don't know what it's like when he's not the superior athlete. He's shown all the prerequisite skills and ability, but he's shown it against guys who can't compete on either level. What's going to happen when the skill and gap isn't 3 or 4 levels? What happens when the skill and gap is like the gap between, your thumb and your pinky? Is he going to be able to handle that? Will he react accordingly? He's from a good camp. His trainers say that, but and I'm not a big fan of believing in it until I've seen it. I've seen too many high-profile prospects all of a sudden fall apart once their athleticism isn't a determining factor. Ronda Rousey, Sage Northcutt, Paige Van Zandt, Ovince St. Preux. I'm not naming names, but I just did.
Yeah, that was yeah. I would love to see both of them in the UFC. I don't think it'll ever happen. But I just looked it up. They're both 28 years old, so maybe there's a chance after they hit 30. But I wouldn't be surprised if these two guys remain outside of the UFC and attempt to make the most money as they possibly can in their career, which is not a bad reason. Not going to be mad at you for that.
That's the problem with it, and it's not a problem, but they want to get the money they're getting. A lot of UFC guys would kill to get right now. And the UFC, neither one of them has a fan base that demands that kind of money or attention. So I think Gaethje might be willing to take it because I think he wants to really test himself against the best. And I know Marlon does too, but Marlon constantly speaks about his family and his kids and the lifestyle they're accustomed to and doing things for them. And I don't know how going to the UFC helps him maintain that lifestyle. I mean,
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that he pointed to when he did re-sign with World Series of Fighting last year.
It can't help that every event you have guys with names who fought major opponents. One person selling their Ultimate Fighter bike. One guy who fought Daniel Cormier says he's living in a tent, and every fighter is begging for a bonus. That's not a good look, dude. That wouldn't make me want to sign.
Yeah, no, it's definitely
Can I have some money? Please.
a problem. It's definitely a problem. Let's look at some of the news stories that broke from this week. Today.
Raphael.
Go ahead.
One thing real quick. UFC, they did my man dirty. It was his last show on UFC 207. No announcement, no special send off. He might not have been the best. Goldberg, yeah.
Well, actually, let's go ahead. Let's talk about that. Go ahead.
He might not have been the best. I made fun of that dude a lot because he would always come in with these weird comments in the middle of fights. I get it, but after being with them for 20 years, you can't do something. You can't give him a goodbye. You can't have him speak at the post-fight conference. Nothing. I understand it's a business, but dude, there's certain you have employees, and
You were slightly breaking up there.
if I'm a fighter, if I'm a fighter, I'm talking to my manager like, maybe I need to get out of here. Look at how they're doing this dude. He's been with him for 20 years, and they're treating him like he's nothing.
And what's crazy is that the story broke today that Todd Grisham is who they're bringing in to join their team in a play-by-play position. And I don't know if you're aware of Todd Grisham, but Todd Grisham, he is leaving ESPN to join UFC along the same lines that John Anik did. But he also was with WWE before that, and he also has experience working with Glory Kickboxing. So he has some combat and sports experience, sports entertainment experience. But yeah, they've already got a replacement in there. They haven't necessarily deemed him a replacement. I'm doing that in air quotes, but they already got a name in there that people are going to recognize, and that I'm pretty interested in seeing how he does in this new role.
I'm sure he'll do good, I've seen some of his work. He's a good guy. Side note: one of the questions I asked is how come we don't have any women cage side? I'm not talking about ex fighters either. I mean, were there any candidates? I'm just asking. I mean, I like to see guys get their opportunities, but we can't get more of a female presence on the analyst position. I mean, like not just determining things like Karen Bryan does, but actually really getting their chance to analyze and break down fights. There's got to be some women out there who are immersed enough in MMA and would like the opportunity. I didn't hear about any of them. I'm not saying it's their fault, but it's just weird to me. I mean, sorry,
Yeah, I mean
it's weird
Julie
to me.
Kessie is doing good work over there at Invicta, but yeah, like who would they bring in?
That's the thing. I don't really know. I'm just I just figure there might be some either podcaster or writer, somebody who's in it and really understands the finer points of it, who they might bring on to kind of expand the role. Right now, the two women they have, they don't do much on the analyst or the play-by-play calls. We've seen women call fights before. They've done it in Invicta before. Why has the UFC not brought somebody in? I mean, is there just nobody, or did they not think that they would work well with the team? I'm just curious. I mean, I didn't even hear about them possibly interviewing any female candidates, and there's got to be some. And it probably looks bad because I don't know any, but that's not my job to know any. It's just my job to ask that question.
Yeah, it's definitely that'll be a question I don't think we'll ever really get down to the bottom to. But yeah, I was kind of surprised to see Todd's name thrown in the hat. And there was the name of Jim Rome that was being thrown around, and I would have been mad if we just
That
seen
would have been
Jim
awful.
Rome. That would have been
Yeah,
awful. But
yeah.
yeah, that would have been horrible. Let's look at what do you think about Brock Lesnar, man, getting that 1 year suspension from USADA. I think his MMA career is over, but I would have thought that would have been over. Would have been the whole case. But what do you think of that call from USADA to give him a year?
I mean, does it really matter? I mean, it's like it just doesn't really matter. I mean, he's got other options to make money. He was only, I mean, if he's a part-time wrestler, he was like a volunteer fighter. So, I mean, I guess it's great because it shows them enforcing the rules. But had they not made exceptions for him in the first place, I don't know that he would have even gotten the cage to fight, to be honest. So, I mean, it's kind of like too little. I'm glad they did it, but maybe too little, too late. It doesn't really change anything.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
like I'm not surprised. It happened. It is what it is. I
yeah,
really
I
don't.
mean, nothing to say about it. It's kind of like something you do for show. Like, look, we laid down the law on Brock. Well, he doesn't really depend on fighting to make his income, and he doesn't really fight that often. So, I mean, your year ban really means nothing. And at his age, I mean, it means less than nothing, to be quite honest, at this stage.
Yeah, like so I'm guessing that sports fans can or MMA fans can kind of get it out of their system that their time of watching Brock Lesnar is finally over in the sport, and he's moved on to some. He's going to move on, going back to what he's doing with showing up with the WWE from time to time.
The UFC champs are going to miss that little bump they got on their paychecks when they collect from pay-per-view points. I know that's somebody who ain't going to be happy he's gone, but everybody else, they didn't really like him. They thought he was an interloper, so it's best that he go somewhere anyways.
I mean, Mark Hunt still wants his paper. He still wants that paycheck. Um, I don't think he's going to get it,
Well,
but that's
hey,
another conversation for another day.
when you take the fight and you take the money, I can't listen to any complaints. If you really want to make a stand, don't take the fight. Say I'm not fighting him. Once you take the
Don't take the
money,
fight.
yeah, he said he's juiced up to the gills, so you already had your suspicions. So if you really want to make a stand, say no, I'm not taking the fight. Let somebody else who's willing to risk their life for money do it. But he didn't do that. He took the money, and if he would have won, he wouldn't have cared. He wouldn't be. I don't think he would have been complaining as much. So he took the money. I can't hear the complaint after. You shouldn't. If you don't take the money, you complain. I get it. Once you take the money, mm, I'm not as sympathetic. I'm just not.
I'm with you on that. I'm not really mad at him either. But with that in mind, man, we're gonna go ahead. We have a weekend where there's no fights, no major fights, so we can sit back and relax. That's what I plan on doing. Not doing anything this weekend actually, but we're gonna hang back. We'll be back next weekend to talk about the upcoming MMA events for next weekend. But with that in mind, let everyone know what you're working on, Schwan, over the next few days.
I will have my final installment of how to develop a prospect, kind of that examines the pitfalls that come to most blue chip prospects coming into MMA. We hitting it was a 3-part series. I kind of got a little setback because I was doing my pieces on Ronda's coach last week, but I'm gonna be finishing this out. Should be out probably Friday, maybe Saturday at the worst. But a couple people had been asking me about it, and this will be the final installment. I hope I've gotten a lot of good feedback from it, not just from fans, but from other writers and from coaches, the fighters. They really seem to like it. So everybody who supported it, I appreciate it, and everybody who supported that piece I did on Edmund, I appreciate that. I got a lot of positive feedback on that, especially the first part, because people said they never seen any article written anywhere where somebody technically broke down the strategic and technical things he brought to Ronda's game. And I also wanted to thank Lawrence Kenshin, Patrick Wyman, and Chris Rini for their indirect and direct contributions, as well as friend of the show, Andrew Pearson, because some conversations with him helped me formulate the concepts for the story I used when I did those two pieces. But yeah, that's all I got going.
Well, as usual, I have a lot of stuff I'm working on for all of the sites that I write for. I'm working on a piece about Chrome Gracie. Did you see him submit Kawajiri
Yeah, that was
over the
amazing.
weekend?
That I mean,
Yeah, man, it was crazy.
Kawajiri is not in his prime anymore, but nobody does that to him. I mean, he's a good enough
He's no
fighter, but nobody does
slouch.
that to him. Yeah,
He's definitely no slouch, and Kron went in there and did the damn thing. So, I don't know. If he continues this slow build and this slow growth, we may be looking at a point where we see a in conversations at some point in time down the line. I'm not sure how old he is. Let me look real quick.
the first legitimate Gracie who may actually
He's
be a
he's
legitimate welterweight
28.
threat. Yeah,
He's 28. He's still young. So we'll see what happens to him over the next few years. But yeah, he went out there and he did the damn thing.
his
On
win over Kawajiri might be the most, and I hate to say this, out of all the wins his uncles have, but as far as the level of competition at the stage he's at, his win might be one of the most legitimate wins in Gracie competition in or out of the cage. If you in or out of MMA, if you think about it, like still be ranked in the UFC, and he beat him and did it easily.
Yeah, I can definitely get here. I can definitely get with you on that. But that's something I plan on writing about this week. Also, some other content that I will be doing as well. But you can always find myself at R Garcia Sports. You can catch us at MMA Ratings Net. You can catch us there. You can catch us on Instagram. Be sure to follow us and follow us on Twitter as well, where we are always doing the best we can to talk about fights and to give you an opportunity to go and rank the fights that you get to watch on MMA, or excuse me, or rank the fights on MMAratings.net that you watch from UFC, Bellator, and everywhere else. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and close the show out. Schwan, thank you for coming on once again, and we'll have you back next week to talk more about the sport that we all love.
Look forward to it. Oh yeah. Side note, Crow Cop. Hope you enjoy retirement.
Oh yes, forgot
Kingo,
about that.
keep your head up. You gave him the toughest fight in the tournament. Still world class. Keep your head up.
And with that in mind, man, we're out. Have a great week, everybody.
You too, sir.
Have a good one.